I need to tell you something before we start. If you have ever booked an Uber or a Lyft alone at night, especially if you are a woman, you need to hear these stories. Not to scare you, but to prepare you. Because the person who gets into that car is not always a driver, and the person behind the wheel is not always who they say they are. These are 3 true stories from real people who took a rideshare and never forgot it. Some of them almost didn't make it home. Listen carefully. And the next time you book a ride, check the license plate. Check the driver's face. And if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Get out, run, and do not look back. The first story comes from a woman named Jessica. She was 23 years old, living in Chicago, working late shifts at a restaurant. She didn't own a car, so she used Uber almost every night to get home. It was expensive, but it was safer than walking. Or so she thought. One night, around 1 in the morning, she finished her shift and booked a ride. The app showed a gray Honda Civic, license plate starting with XRY, driver named Michael with a 4.9 star rating. She waited on the curb, tired, hungry, just wanting to get home and sleep. A gray Honda Civic pulled up. She checked the license plate, XRY. It matched. She opened the back door and got in. The driver looked over his shoulder and said her name. Jessica? She said yes. He smiled and said, "Let's get you home." She buckled her seatbelt and pulled out her phone to text her roommate. That's when she noticed something strange. The driver's photo in the app showed a man with short brown hair, a beard, and glasses. The man driving had short brown hair and a beard, but no glasses, and his face was thinner. Different bone structure. She looked at the photo again, then at the driver. She asked, "Are you Michael?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Yeah, I just lost some weight." Jessica laughed nervously. She wanted to believe him. She didn't want to be rude. But something felt wrong. Her stomach was telling her something that her brain was trying to ignore. She decided to check the app again. She looked at the driver's profile. There was a button that said Share Trip Status. She pressed it and sent her location to her roommate. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror. He saw her phone. His jaw tightened. He asked, "Who did you text?" Jessica said, "Just my roommate. She likes to know when I'm almost home." The driver didn't respond. He just kept driving. But Jessica noticed he was taking a different route. The app showed a left turn coming up. He went straight. She said, "I think you missed the turn." He said, "Traffic. I know a faster way." But there was no traffic. The streets were empty. Jessica's heart started pounding. She looked out the window. They were heading toward an industrial area. Warehouses, dark streets, no houses, no lights. She asked him to let her out. He didn't respond. She asked again, louder. He still didn't respond. She reached for the door handle. That's when she heard the click. He had locked the doors. Jessica didn't think. She didn't plan. She just acted. She leaned forward and grabbed the steering wheel. The car swerved. The driver shouted and tried to push her hand away. She yanked the wheel hard to the right. The car jumped the curb and hit a lamppost. The airbags didn't deploy, but the impact was enough to stop the car. Jessica unlocked the door, pushed it open, and ran. She didn't look back. She ran until she found a gas station. She ran inside and told the cashier to call 911. The police arrived within minutes. They found the car still wrapped around the lamppost. But the driver was gone. He had fled on foot. They ran his license plate. It was not registered to anyone named Michael. The car had been reported stolen 3 days earlier. The real Michael, the real Uber driver, had been carjacked at gunpoint. He was found tied up in his own apartment. He was okay, but he had no idea who took his car or his phone. The police never caught the fake driver. They checked security cameras in the area. They saw a man running from the crash scene, but his face was covered. He disappeared into the night. Jessica moved out of Chicago a month later. She doesn't take Ubers anymore. She doesn't take taxis. She bought a car. She drives herself everywhere. And every time she sees a gray Honda Civic, her hands start to shake. After that story, You might think you would never get into the wrong car. You might think you would check the license plate and the driver's face. But the next story shows how easy it is to make a mistake, especially when you are tired, especially when you are alone, especially when you are not paying attention. This second story comes from a man named David. He was 27 years old, living in Atlanta, working as a software engineer. He had just broken up with his girlfriend and was staying at a friend's house for a few days. One night, he decided to go to a bar to clear his head. He had a few drinks, not too many. He was still aware of his surroundings. Around midnight, he booked a Lyft back to his friend's house. The app showed a black Toyota Camry, license plate starting with TPL, driver named Marcus with a 4.8 star rating. He waited outside the bar. A black Toyota Camry pulled up. He checked the license plate. TPL. It matched. He opened the back door and got in. The driver said his name. David? David said yes. The driver said, "Rough night?" David laughed and said, "You could say that." They made small talk for a few minutes. David didn't think anything was wrong. The driver seemed normal, friendly even. But then David noticed something. The driver kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Not quick glances. Long, steady stares, like he was studying David's face, like he was memorizing it. David felt uncomfortable. He looked away and stared out the window. That's when he realized they were not going toward his friend's house. They were going in the opposite direction. David asked, "Where are we going?" The driver said, "Shortcut." David said, "This isn't a shortcut. My friend's house is east. We're going west." The driver didn't respond. David said, "Let me out here." The driver still didn't respond. David reached for the door handle, locked. He tried to unlock it manually. It wouldn't budge. The driver had disabled the child locks. David started to panic. He pulled out his phone to call 911. The driver reached back and slapped the phone out of his hand. It fell to the floor. David leaned down to grab it. The driver slammed on the brakes. David was thrown forward, his head hitting the back of the driver's seat. When he looked up, the driver was turned around, facing him. He was holding a knife, a small pocket knife, but sharp enough. He said, "Give me your wallet. Give me your phone. Give me everything you have." David didn't argue. He handed over his wallet, his phone, his watch. The driver looked at the items, then back at David. He said, "Now get out." He unlocked the doors. David pushed the door open and stumbled out onto the street. The driver sped away. David stood there, in the middle of a dark street, in a neighborhood he didn't recognize, with no phone, no wallet, no way to call for help. He walked for 20 minutes until he found a gas station. The cashier let him use the phone. He called the police. He called his friend. The police took a report, but they never found the driver. The Lyft account used for that trip had been created that same day. The name Marcus was fake. The photo was stolen from someone's social media. The car had been rented from a car rental agency using a fake ID. David never got his stuff back. He never took a ride share again. He told me that the scariest part wasn't the knife. It was the way the driver looked at him, like he was prey, like he had done this before, like he would do it again. You might think these stories only happen in big cities, Chicago, Atlanta, places where crime is common. But the next story takes place in a small town, a quiet town, a town where everyone knows everyone, a town where nothing bad ever happens, until it does. This third story comes from a woman named Emily. She was 19 years old, a college student in a small town in upstate New York. She had a late class on Tuesdays that ended at 9:30 at night. The campus was small, and her apartment was only a 10-minute walk away. But her parents insisted she take a ride share instead of walking alone in the dark. So every Tuesday night, she booked an Uber. The same driver kept picking her up. His name was Tom. He was in his 50s, had a kind face, always made small talk about the weather and her classes. He had a 4.9 star rating. Emily felt safe with him. She even stopped checking the license plate because she recognized his car, a blue Ford Focus. One Tuesday night, she booked her usual ride. A blue Ford Focus pulled up. She opened the back door and got in without looking at the driver's face. She was tired. It had been a long day. She put her head against the window and closed her eyes. She heard the car start. She heard the doors lock. That's normal. Most cars lock automatically when they start moving. She didn't think anything of it. But then she noticed the car smelled different. Tom's car always smelled like coffee. This car smelled like cigarettes and air freshener trying to cover it up. She opened her eyes and looked at the driver. It was not Tom. It was a younger man, thinner face, darker hair. He was wearing a hat pulled low over his eyes. Emily said, "You're not Tom." The driver said, "Tom couldn't make it. He asked me to cover for him." Emily said, "I don't feel comfortable. Can you let me out?" The driver didn't respond. He kept driving. Emily said, "Let me out now." The driver still didn't respond. Emily reached for her phone. She had already sent her trip status to her roommate. She opened the app and saw something that made her blood run cold. The app showed that her driver was still Tom. The car was supposed to be a blue Ford Focus. It was. The license plate matched, but the driver's face in the app did not match the man behind the wheel. Someone had stolen Tom's car. Or worse, someone had done something to Tom. Emily didn't wait. She didn't ask again. She grabbed the door handle and pulled. It was locked. She pulled the lock up manually and pushed the door open. The car was moving, maybe 30 miles per hour. She jumped. She hit the ground and rolled. Her shoulder took most of the impact. She felt pain shoot through her arm. But she got up. She ran. She didn't look back. She ran until she found a house with lights on. She banged on the door until a woman opened it. She told the woman everything. The woman called the police. The police found the blue Ford Focus abandoned on a side street. The driver was gone. They found Tom's phone in the glove compartment. They found Tom tied up in the trunk of his own car. He was alive, but barely. He had been beaten and left there for hours. The man who took his car was never caught. Security cameras showed him walking away from the abandoned car and disappearing into a nearby park. Police searched the area. They found nothing. Emily spent 3 days in the hospital. Her shoulder was badly bruised. She had cuts on her hands and knees from the fall. But she was alive. She told me that she still has nightmares about that night. She dreams about the car, about the smell of cigarettes, about the man in the hat. She doesn't take ride shares anymore. She doesn't walk alone at night. She doesn't trust strangers. And she always checks the driver's face before she gets into any car. Before I tell you the next story, I want you to understand something. The first 3 stories were about strangers, fake drivers, stolen cars, people who planned to hurt you from the moment you got in. But the next stories are different. These are about people who thought they were safe, people who checked the license plate, who checked the driver's face, who did everything right. And still, something went terribly wrong. Because sometimes, the danger is not the driver. Sometimes, the danger is already in the car, and you don't find out until it's too late. This 4th story comes from a woman named Sarah. She was 26 years old, living in Houston, Texas. She worked as a nurse at a busy hospital, and her shifts often ended after midnight. She was smart about safety. She always checked the license plate. She always checked the driver's face. She always shared her trip status with her boyfriend. She had taken over 200 rides without a single problem. Until one night, she booked a Lyft home from work. The app showed a white Toyota Corolla, license plate starting with JKV, driver named Robert with a 4.9 star rating. The car pulled up. She checked the plate. JKV. She checked the driver's face. It matched the photo. She got in. The driver said hello, confirmed her destination, and started driving. Sarah settled into the back seat and pulled out her phone to text her boyfriend. Everything was normal. The car was clean. The driver was polite. He didn't talk too much. He didn't stare. He just drove. Sarah started to relax. She put her phone away and looked out the window. They were about 10 minutes from her apartment when she noticed something. The back seat had a small tear in the upholstery, and under the tear she could see something red, not the color of the seat, a different red, dark red, like dried paint, or something else. She tried to ignore it, but her eyes kept going back to that tear. She leaned closer. The red stain was not paint. It was too dark, too brown in the center. She had worked in a hospital for years. She knew what dried blood looked like. This was dried blood. Her heart started to pound. She looked at the driver. He was watching her in the rearview mirror. Their eyes met. He quickly looked away. Sarah said, "What's that stain on the seat?" The driver said, "Oh, my kid spilled juice last week. I've been meaning to clean it." Sarah knew juice didn't look like that. Juice didn't turn brown. Juice didn't soak into the fabric like that. She said, "Can you pull over? I need to get something from my bag." The driver said, "We're almost there. I'll pull over at your apartment." Sarah didn't wait. She reached for the door handle. It was not locked. She opened the door while the car was still moving. The driver slammed on the brakes. Sarah jumped out. She stumbled but stayed on her feet. She ran. She didn't look back. She ran until she reached a gas station. She called her boyfriend. She called the police. The police traced the Lyft account. The driver's name was Robert. He had a clean record. No arrests, no complaints. But when they searched his car, they found something disturbing. Under the back seat, hidden in a compartment, they found a knife, duct tape, and rope. They also found a phone that did not belong to Robert. It belonged to a woman who had been reported missing 3 months earlier. Her name was Lisa. She was 24 years old. She had taken a Lyft home from a bar and never arrived. Robert was arrested. He was charged with kidnapping and murder. Lisa's body was found in a field outside the city. She had been stabbed multiple times. The knife in Robert's car matched the wounds. Robert is now serving a life sentence. Sarah testified at his trial. She told the court about the stain on the seat. She told them about the way he looked at her in the rearview mirror. She told them that she still has nightmares, that she can't get into any car without checking every surface, that she carries pepper spray everywhere, that she doesn't trust anyone. The judge asked her if she had anything else to say. She looked at Robert and said, "I hope you rot in hell." He didn't react. He just stared at the floor. Sarah moved to a different city after the trial. She doesn't take ride shares anymore. She bought a car. She drives herself everywhere. But sometimes when she sees a white Toyota Corolla, she still feels her heart stop. She still smells the blood. She still sees Robert's eyes in the rearview mirror. That story is hard to hear, I know. But the next one is even harder. Because the next one is about someone who did everything right and still almost died. Not because of a fake driver, not because of a hidden knife, but because of something much simpler, much more common, much harder to avoid. This fifth story comes from a man named Kevin. He was 31 years old, living in Denver, Colorado. He was a firefighter. He was strong, capable, not easily scared. He had taken hundreds of Ubers without any issues. One night, he was coming home from a friend's birthday party. He had a few drinks, but he was not drunk. He booked an Uber. The app showed a red Ford Fusion, license plate starting with MKL, driver named David with a 4.8 star rating. The car pulled up. Kevin checked the plate. MKL. He checked the driver's face. It matched the photo. He got in the front seat. Some people prefer the front seat. Kevin was one of them. He liked to talk to the driver. He liked to be friendly. The driver was friendly too. They talked about sports, about the weather, about the party Kevin had just left. Everything was normal. Kevin felt safe. He even closed his eyes for a few minutes. He was tired. It had been a long week. When he opened his eyes, they were not on the highway anymore. They were on a small road, a dirt road, with no streetlights, no houses, no other cars. Kevin sat up straight. He said, "Where are we?" The driver said, "Shortcut. Saves about 10 minutes. Kevin said, "There's no shortcut to my apartment. I've lived there for 5 years. The driver didn't respond. Kevin said, "Pull over, let me out." The driver pulled over, but he didn't unlock the doors. He turned off the engine, and then he turned to face Kevin. He was smiling. Not a friendly smile, a hungry smile, like a predator who had finally caught its prey. He said, "You know, I've been doing this for a long time. I've picked up hundreds of people, men, women, old, young, and I've learned something. The ones who sit in the front seat, they're the easiest. They trust me. They let their guard down. They don't even notice when I take the wrong turn until it's too late." Kevin didn't wait. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He reached over and grabbed the driver's head and slammed it against the window. Once, twice, 3 times. The driver went limp. Kevin reached across and unlocked the door. He got out. He ran. He didn't stop running until he reached a main road. He called 911. The police found the car still on the dirt road. The driver was gone. He had fled into the woods. They searched for hours. They never found him. The Uber account used for that trip was created that same day. The name David was fake. The photo was stolen. The car was stolen from a rental lot. Kevin never took another rideshare again. He told me that he still has nightmares about that smile. That hungry smile. The smile of someone who has done this before. Someone who will do it again. The last story I want to share is the one that still keeps me up at night. It happened to a woman named Rachel. She was 22 years old, a graduate student in Boston. She was smart, careful, and paranoid. She always checked the license plate. She always checked the driver's face. She always sat in the back seat. She always shared her trip status. She did everything right. One night, she booked a ride home from the library. It was almost 2 in the morning. The app showed a silver Nissan Altima, license plate starting with GTR, driver named James with a 4.9 star rating. The car pulled up. She checked the plate. GTR. She checked the driver's face. It matched the photo. She got in the back seat. The driver confirmed her destination and started driving. Rachel pulled out her phone and texted her roommate. "In the Uber, home in 15. Her roommate texted back, "Kay, love you." Rachel smiled and put her phone away. She looked out the window. They were on the main road. Everything was normal. Then the driver made a turn. Not a wrong turn, just a turn. Rachel didn't think anything of it, but then he made another turn, and another. Rachel looked at her phone's map. They were going in circles. She said, "Are you lost?" The driver said, "No, I just like driving." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. She said, "Can you just take me home, please?" The driver didn't respond. He kept driving. He kept making turns. He was driving in a pattern, a square, around the same 4 blocks, over and over. Rachel said, "Let me out here." The driver didn't respond. She reached for the door handle, locked. She tried to unlock it manually. It wouldn't budge. The child locks were on. She started to panic. She pulled out her phone to call 911. The driver reached back and grabbed her phone. He threw it out the window. Rachel watched her phone shatter on the pavement. She was alone, in a car with a stranger. No phone. No way to call for help. No one knew where she was. She had already texted her roommate that she was in the Uber. Her roommate thought she was safe. The driver stopped the car in front of an abandoned house. He turned off the engine. He turned around and looked at her. He didn't say anything. He just looked. Rachel looked back. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She looked him in the eyes and said, "My roommate knows I'm in this car. She has your license plate. She has your face. If you hurt me, they will find you." The driver stared at her for a long time. Then he unlocked the doors. He said, "Get out." Rachel got out. She ran. She didn't look back. She ran until she found a police station. She told the officers everything. They traced the Uber account. It was real. The driver's name was James. He had a clean record, but when they went to his apartment, he was gone. He had packed a bag and left. They found his car abandoned at the airport. He had flown to another country. He has never been caught. Rachel moved to a different state. She changed her phone number. She changed her name. She told me that she still looks over her shoulder. She still checks the license plate of every car that passes her. She still has nightmares about that drive, about the pattern, about the way he looked at her, like she was already dead. She told me that the scariest part wasn't the drive. It wasn't the abandoned house. It was what the police found in James's apartment. In his closet, they found a box. Inside the box, there were photos, dozens of photos, all of women, all of them taken from a distance. All of them were Rachel's friends, Rachel's classmates, Rachel's co-workers. He had been watching her for months. He knew her schedule. He knew her routine. He knew where she lived. He knew where she studied. He knew everything about her. And he waited. He waited until she was alone, until it was late, until she was tired, until she made a mistake. She didn't make a mistake. She did everything right. But he was patient, and patience is the scariest thing of all.